I walked into a room full of laughing robots, and something felt strange. Everyone around me seemed to be talking, smiling, leaning close together. I stood there, arms at my sides, watching everyone connect with someone else. Nearby, two robots leaned in, laughing at something only they understood together. A thin, invisible line seemed to separate me from every warm little circle. A quiet feeling settled in my chest, small, almost too soft to notice. I glanced down at my own hands, not sure what this feeling was. So many robots around me, and somehow I felt more alone than ever. So here is the question worth asking, gently out loud. Why does a crowded room sometimes make loneliness feel even stronger? Naturally, everyone around me had an answer, quick and confident and simple. What everyone thinks appeared in bright letters above the little hallway scene. A teacher robot adjusted its glasses and said, "Just talk to someone." I nodded politely, though the advice slid right past the real feeling. A businessman robot straightened its tie and said, "Just get out more." I already went out plenty, and the quiet feeling still followed me. A doctor robot tilted its head mirror and said, "You seem fine physically." Physically fine did not seem to match what my insides were saying. An elderly robot leaned on its cane and said, "You are surrounded by friends." Surrounded, yes, but something about the word friends still felt incomplete. A scientist robot adjusted its goggles and said, "That is simply illogical statistically." Feelings, it turned out, rarely follow the tidy logic of a chart. A worker robot adjusted its hard hat and said, "Stay busy, that helps." Busy hands, it seemed, did not always mean a full, connected heart. A student robot adjusted its cap and said, "Everyone feels this sometimes." True, perhaps, but knowing others feel it did not explain the why. A child robot with a tiny backpack asked, "Are you sad right now?" The simple honesty of that question landed closer than any grown-up answer. Every answer I heard assumed loneliness meant simply being physically alone somewhere. But I was not physically alone, not even close, not for a second. So every fix aimed at the wrong target, and the feeling stayed put. Something deeper was going on, something none of the easy answers touched. Time to look closer, past the easy answers, into the actual science. What's actually going on appeared above a calm, simple study room. Researchers describe loneliness in a very particular, surprisingly simple way, actually. Loneliness is the gap between the connection we want and the connection we feel. It has almost nothing to do with how many bodies fill a room. It is a feeling, quiet and personal, not a simple head count of people. Picture a measuring tape stretched between what we want and what we feel. When that gap grows wider, the lonely feeling grows stronger right along with it. So here's the twist: a crowded room can actually make worse. A crowd can widen that very gap instead of closing it, quietly. Researchers call this a contrast effect, and it works in a simple way. Seeing others look connected makes our own missing connection feel much more obvious. It is like standing in bright sunlight and suddenly noticing your own shadow. The brighter the room feels, the darker that little shadow can seem. There is also something happening quietly inside the lonely brain itself, too. Scientists studying this, including researcher John Cacioppo, noticed something fascinating about vigilance. Lonely brains scan more actively for signs of social threat and rejection. It is as if a tiny radar dish sits quietly on top of the head, always sweeping the room, searching for even the smallest hint of rejection. That extra scanning can make a busy room feel even more exhausting, honestly. There is another piece of this puzzle worth looking at closely, too. Crowds are often full of surface talk, small chatter that never goes deep. How is the weather rarely fills the same space as real understanding. Surface interaction fills the air, but it rarely fills the feeling underneath. A crowded party can be loud with words and still feel oddly empty. Let us picture a room full of robots, each one behind an invisible wall. Everyone can see each other clearly, yet nobody quite reaches the other side. The narrator robot noticed its own wall too. Thin, quiet, and easy to miss. So the twist becomes clear. More people rarely means more real connection automatically. Sometimes a small, quiet room with one true friend feels far less lonely than a giant party crowded wall to wall with strangers passing by quickly. This phenomenon even has its own name in psychology, called crowded loneliness. It is different from simple physical isolation, which means actually being alone. One is about missing people, the other is about missing real understanding. Research also suggests this feeling shows up more often in busy urban environments, and often at social events like parties, where the contrast feels strongest. The reasons behind this pattern are complex, not fully settled, still studied. So no single simple cause explains it fully, and that is perfectly fine. Let us gather the pieces together now, quietly, one more time, clearly. Loneliness is a felt gap, not a head count of people standing nearby. Crowds widen that gap through contrast, making the missing piece feel louder. Lonely brains scan harder for threat, adding quiet extra effort underneath everything. And surface talk rarely reaches the deeper connection our hearts are seeking. Put together, a crowded room can genuinely make loneliness feel sharper, not softer. None of this means anything is wrong with the person feeling it, ever. It simply means the brain is noticing a real and very human need. So why does understanding this actually matter, beyond simply knowing the facts? Why it matters appeared gently above a quiet, warm little kitchen scene. Loneliness works like a signal, similar to how hunger signals the need for food. Hunger tells the body it needs food, nothing shameful about that message. Loneliness tells the heart it needs connection, just as natural, just as normal. A signal is simply information, not a judgment about anyone's worth or character. So this feeling is never a flaw hiding somewhere deep inside a person. It is simply the brain doing its quiet, caring job, noticing something real. Modern life often gathers bodies together without gathering hearts together as well. Offices, buses, and busy streets place us close, but rarely close in feeling. Physical closeness became easy, but meaningful closeness stayed harder to find. Screens fill spare moments quickly, often before a real conversation gets the chance. None of this is a small failure. It is simply how modern life grew. Wanting real closeness takes a quiet kind of courage worth noticing and honoring. It means still hoping for something real, even after feeling that gap before. That quiet hope is a very human thing, worth protecting rather than hiding. Understanding the gap does not close it instantly, but it does soften it. Naming the feeling clearly often takes away some of its heavier, confusing weight. The feeling was never really about the number of robots filling the room. It was always about wanting to be truly seen by someone, anyone, deeply. So here we are again, back in the same crowded, noisy little room. The takeaway appeared softly above the familiar, warm, busy party scene. This time, instead of scanning for connection everywhere, I simply looked around slowly. The little radar dish on my head had finally gone quiet and still. Near the edge of the room, one other robot stood quietly, looking a little lost. Its eyes had that same faint, familiar gap I had carried all evening. I did not walk over with a fix or an answer or advice. I simply walked a little closer and offered a small, quiet nod. The other robot noticed, paused, and gave a small, grateful nod right back. Nothing was fixed exactly, but something small and warm had shifted quietly. Two robots, still surrounded by noise, but a little less alone together now. Just a small thread, not a solution, quietly stretched between two people. Loneliness in a crowd was never really about the crowd around us at all. It was always about wanting one honest thread of real connection somewhere. And sometimes that thread starts with something as small and simple as a nod. If this quiet feeling ever visits, know it is simply asking for something real. It is not a flaw, just a signal, quietly pointing toward genuine connection. We will keep exploring these quiet human questions together, one curious thought at a time. If this thought felt worth sitting with, consider following along for more. Thank you for sitting quietly with this question right here until the end.